Dear Patriots, before the news starts, please subscribe to our patriotic channel by clicking the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up to this video. Don't forget to leave your opinion below in the comments section. Share the news on Facebook and Twitter so you friends see it. Thank you.
Congress closes in on massive spending bill. Congressional leaders and top White House officials are clearing the way for a massive $1.3 trillion spending bill, scrapping several last-minute attempts to tack on controversial policy riders ahead of a Friday deadline to fund the government. Trump administration and Hill GOP sources say the new spending package is unlikely to include legislation shoring up Obamacare's insurance markets. One White House official called it a heavy lift, even as President Donald Trump made a last-minute push Monday to include the provision in the legislation. The president also asked GOP leaders over the weekend to include a short-term patch shielding Dreamers from deportation for 2.5 years in return for $25 billion in wall funding. But Democrats, whose votes are needed for passage, balked at the idea, and Republicans appear ready to drop it. Roughly $900 million in transportation funding for a massive New York-New Jersey infrastructure project is also expected to get sidelined because of Trump's veto threat on the so-called Gateway project. Gone too are conservative demands to defund Planned Parenthood or cut off money to sanctuary cities that protect undocumented immigrants. Congressional negotiators are rejecting pleas from both parties to load up the must-pass bill with other long-simmering policy items as they attempt to avert a third shutdown in 3 months. Lawmakers have just 4 days until funding runs dry. Speaker Paul Ryan outlined the new spending bill in a rare House GOP conference meeting Monday night, but release of the bill slipped to Tuesday. Aides cautioned that nothing is finalized until the legislation goes public. The House will need to pass the funding bill by midweek to avoid a potential disaster in the Senate, where one senator can single-handedly provoke a shutdown if Congress veers too close to the deadline. Senator Rand Paul, RI, proved that when his opposition closed the federal government for a few hours last month. Negotiators spent much of Monday still haggling back and forth. The Senate and House, for example, still appeared at odds over whether to include House-passed legislation overhauling the Hill's much maligned sexual harassment policies. Some in the Senate took issue with the House bill, and negotiators appeared poised to axe the entire thing. The fight over an Obamacare stabilization package also spilled over from the weekend, with Republicans still trading offers Monday afternoon. A group of GOP senators and House Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Greg Walden met with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Monday in a last-minute push to include the Obamacare subsidies, but were not optimistic. "I'm trying to make sure we get stabilization payments because if we don't, the insurance premiums are going to go up dramatically. And our Democratic friends are not being helpful," Senator Lindsey Graham, RSC, said as he left McConnell's office. Trump has privately assured one of the bill's chief authors, Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican Tennessee, for weeks that he supports steadying Obamacare markets this fall. Without action, insurers warn that huge premium hikes would hit consumers just weeks before the 2018 elections. Alexander said the House can add the insurance language on Monday night or the Senate could add it later this week with an amendment. But he was insistent the proposal's supporters get a vote. "My only goal is I want senators and congressmen to have a chance to vote on it," Alexander said. "This is going to be announced on October 1st, 1 month before the election. I want them to be accountable for a vote on an opportunity we all have to lose rates by 40% for people who are suffering." GOP leaders, however, have demanded new restrictions on abortion in Obamacare plans in exchange for propping up a law that they have long detested. Republicans, led by Ryan, insist that the Obamacare money must prohibit federal funding of abortion, similar to the so-called Hyde Amendment that is attached to most spending bills. Democrats, led by House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senator Patty Murray of Washington, say they won't allow it because doing so would prevent Obamacare payments from touching any insurance plan that covers abortion. That would pose a huge new hurdle in abortion access for mostly low-income women, they say. These are firm lines in the sand, according to their camps. Democrats say the latest proposal is more harsh than Hyde because it would impose a 3-year rolling ban on the funding, instead of the annual renewal, which has been re-upped every year since the mid-1970s. They say it could also allow the administration to broadly limit Obamacare insurance plans that cover abortion. After weeks of back and forth, Democrats say GOP leaders were still pushing for that Hyde language as recently as Monday afternoon. The latest thing that they're offering on this still has expanded Hyde. That is not going to fly. It also prohibits states from regulating short-term plans. Those two things are both complete non-starters, a senior Democratic aide said. Pelosi has publicly voiced skepticism that any Obamacare compromise will make it into the spending bill. One of the regrets we have about the negotiation is that we thought there'd be a chance to have a health piece, like reinsurance, Pelosi said Thursday, citing disputes over the abortion language. Immigration has been another flashpoint in the spending talks. The White House pitched an offer directly to Democrats this weekend that would have granted 2 years of legal protections for the 1.8 million undocumented immigrants eligible under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, in exchange for $25 billion to build the wall. But Democrats refused, insisting on a pathway to citizenship for the 1.8 million people who remain in limbo after Trump rescinded DACA. White House officials are now eyeing $1.6 billion for a boost in border security, which would likely help staff up border and immigration agencies and fund more detention beds. Trump may get his way on one item in the spending bill, blocking funding for the Gateway project. Trump has threatened to veto the entire $1.3 trillion spending bill over $900 million that would be set aside for a long-planned railway under the Hudson River. The move has infuriated New York and New Jersey lawmakers from both parties, from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, to Representative Peter King, RNY. But Trump has refused to budge on the issue, despite personal lobbying from King during the president's visit to Capitol Hill during a St. Patrick's Day luncheon on Friday. A bipartisan group of lawmakers, led by Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn, Republican Texas, has also pushed to include a bill to improve the FBI's background check system in the wake of last month's deadly shooting at a Florida high school. Some House conservatives have said they'll refuse to back the bill without also expanding the right to concealed carry. But Cornyn told reporters Monday he can't imagine why it wouldn't be included in the omnibus bill. In the House, conservative Republicans are expected to oppose the bill in droves, balking at the $143 billion in new spending for both the Pentagon and domestic programs. Several members in the House Freedom Caucus and the Republican Study Committee have demanded more conservative policy provisions, such as defunding Planned Parenthood and expanding the Hyde Amendment. The lack of abortion restrictions in the omnibus is already causing a rift in the House GOP. In a Monday morning meeting, several staffers on the Conservative Republican Study Committee pressed the GOP leadership aides in attendance on the lack of pro-life language in the spending bill. Specifically, they called for defunding Planned Parenthood and extending the Hyde Amendment, something that the GOP leadership aides did not commit to, according to one GOP aide in the room. Ours control the House and Senate and White House. This still should reflect that, the aide said. There isn't even a bone here. But Democratic votes are likely to be needed on any bill to fund the government through September, giving conservatives less leverage. The omnibus is likely among the last major pieces of legislation to clear Congress before the midterm elections, and lawmakers have spent weeks lobbying leadership on a slew of personal priorities, ranging from expanding the powers of the Export-Import Bank to fixing the grain glitch in the GOP tax law. Anybody who sees a train leaving the station wants to hitch a ride, Pelosi told reporters Thursday. There's a list this long. Jennifer Haberkorn and Heather Cagle contributed to this report. Koch groups urge Trump to accept Democrats' immigration deal. The Koch network has a rare message for President Donald Trump: take the Democrats' immigration deal. A trio of organizations supported by Charles and David Koch is urging Trump to accept Congressional Democrats' weekend offer, which would deliver $25 billion for a border wall and security in exchange for a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million young immigrants, according to officials in the Koch network. The White House was unwilling to accept the deal, instead offering Democrats a 2.5-year extension of protections for so-called Dreamers facing deportation in return for wall money and dropping their demands for cuts to legal immigration. But the Koch groups, Labor Initiative, Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Partners, are all advising the president to take the Democrats' deal. Brent Gardner, a government affairs official for Americans for Prosperity, called the proposal an offer all parties should immediately accept, and Labor Initiative's president, Daniel Garza, said Congress and the White House should seize this chance. Nathan Nascimento, an executive vice president at Freedom Partners Chamber of Commerce, said, if a deal was on the table that offered both security at the border and permanent status for Dreamers, that's a deal that Republicans, Democrats and President Trump should support. Democrats' offer came in response to a last-ditch attempt by the Trump administration to get border funding in the omnibus spending bill that must pass this week. The White House offered protections for Dreamers, recipients of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program, or DACA, through September 2020, according to people familiar with the talks, but Democrats were unwilling to strike a permanent deal on wall funding in exchange for a temporary solution for Dreamers. After the weekend impasse, lawmakers said it was unlikely that any deal extending expired protections for the DACA recipients would be included in the spending deal. But Congress will probably have to return to the issue again in the future after the courts rule on Trump's decision to rescind the program. Dems under pressure to block Pompeo, Haspel. Senate Democrats are coming under pressure from the left to tank President Donald Trump's latest cabinet nominees, setting up a major test of unity for the party. Trump's choice of CIA Deputy Director Gina Haspel to lead the spy agency and CIA Chief Mike Pompeo to be the next Secretary of State is fueling a fierce opposition campaign among liberal and civil rights groups. Activists sense an opening to derail Haspel's bid and at least complicate Pompeo's confirmation, given that the White House will need some Democratic support to pull the nominees across the finish line. It's not just Haspel's previous role in the use of interrogation tactics tantamount to torture against CIA detainees. Pompeo has taken a highly hawkish stance on Iran and amassed a controversial record on Islam, fighter for the left's campaign to persuade 15 Senate Democratic caucus members who voted for him to be CIA director to oppose him as State Department chief. With Senate Democrats still trying to heal a schism between moderates and Senator Elizabeth Warren, D-Mass, over a banking deregulation bill, the Pompeo and Haspel confirmation fights offer the chance for a moment of reconciliation between the wings of the caucus, or a further fracturing that finds vulnerable red state incumbents on the GOP's side. It's even unclear where Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat California, a blue state veteran who's spent years fighting the legacy of the CIA's enhanced interrogation program, will end up. She faced an early jab from her liberal challenger to take a tougher line against Haspel and is now moving in that direction. Still, Feinstein and many in her party are not saying where they stand before confirmation hearings begin. Democrats are losing this opportunity to define a moral backbone for the party, to distinguish themselves on values, said Faiz Shakir, National Political Director at the American Civil Liberties Union and a former Senate Democratic aide. Certainly, Trump loves torture, he's said it works. This is a clear opportunity to say, that's him and this is us. A complete break. One Democrat who supported Pompeo to lead CIA is already leaving the door open to opposing him as Secretary of State. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat Virginia, a Foreign Relations Committee member, told Politico he has some major concerns about the bid. The intel position is so different than being the chief diplomat, Kaine said in an interview last week. And his track record as a House member was not pro-diplomacy, his track record was anti-diplomacy, and, I think, preferring war first, that could exacerbate some major concerns I have about the president's attitude. Another Senate Democrat on the Foreign Relations panel who backed Pompeo's CIA nomination, Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire, also said in an interview that she wants to gauge his answers to budget and personnel questions before deciding how she'll vote. With Senator John McCain, Republican Arizona, absent, and Senator Rand Paul, RCI, opposed to Haspel and Pompeo, the Trump White House is likely to need Democratic votes to win confirmation. That means a handful of senators are in line for a maximum pressure campaign from the left. The Intelligence Committee's top Democrat, Virginia Senator Mark Warner, was among 15 members of the minority to support Pompeo's CIA nomination last year. He's declining to tip his hand on Haspel, however, telling reporters late last week that there's going to be a lot of legitimate questions that need to be answered, and I hope that she will be as forthcoming as possible while protecting sources and methods. Liberal and civil rights groups would like to see Warner join Feinstein and other Democrats in asking for the declassification of CIA records on Haspel's role in the George W. Bush administration's use of brutal interrogation tactics, including waterboarding. Warner said that within the bounds of protecting sources and methods, yes, I want to see as much declassified as possible about Haspel's past activity. But that may not be enough for advocates who warn that the agency is unlikely to act without a more direct edict from the Senate. I don't think CIA will agree to it if the committee doesn't force the issue, and I don't think the committee will force the issue unless Warner is willing to tell Intelligence Committee Chairman Richard Burr that it needs to happen. Catherine Hawkins, an investigator for the Project on Government Oversight, said in an interview. POGO joined more than 24 liberal and civil liberties groups in a Friday plea for the Senate to declassify Haspel material. Amnesty International went further on Monday, urging Trump to withdraw her nomination and launch an investigation into her past. Senator Ron Wyden, D.R., who, along with Senator Martin Heinrich, D&M, began pressing for the declassification of Haspel records last year, said Monday that I believe there is a significant amount of her background that can be declassified without compromising sensitive, classified information. Feinstein raised alarms on the left last week by telling reporters that Haspel had been a good deputy director, citing a personal dinner with the 3-decade agency veteran. But within days, after taking a hit from her California primary challenger Kevin DeLeon, Feinstein was aligning with Wyden and Heinrich in pushing for declassification. White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short didn't rule out giving lawmakers access to some material, telling CBS Face the Nation on Sunday, I'm sure that we are going to want to provide as much information as necessary, without compromising any international secrets. Two other Democrats being watched by advocacy groups are Senator Bill Nelson of Florida, who opposed Pompeo for CIA but appeared open to Haspel last week, and Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who last year shifted from yes to no on a Trump nominee involved in the Bush-era legal memos that cleared the use of the interrogation tactics. Manchin, an Intelligence Committee member, changed his stance on Stephen Bradbury's nomination to be Department of Transportation General Counsel after getting a personal appeal from McCain. Given that Manchin opposed Bradbury for a role that's not connected to national security, activists are hopeful that the red state Democrat and frequent Trump ally will also nix Haspel. There's no rational argument for opposing Bradbury's nomination and not opposing Haspel's, Scott Rome, Washington office director for the nonprofit Center for Victims of Torture, said in an interview. Manchin has declined to indicate how he'll vote on Haspel or Pompeo ahead of meetings with the nominees. Pompeo met on Monday with Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker, Republican Tennessee, who is eyeing a confirmation hearing as soon as April 12 if the nomination paperwork is in on time. Another Senate Democrat the left is closely watching on the nominations, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, who told Politico in a Friday statement that neither confirmation is a sure thing. Schumer told reporters on the day Pompeo and Haspel were tapped, however, that he's not yet urging his caucus to come out in opposition. And if he doesn't whip against the nominees, the grassroots activists the party is counting on to come out in November are likely going to be disappointed. The short answer is no. There is no reason for any Democrats to vote to confirm either Pompeo or Haspel, said Elizabeth Beavers, policy manager for the liberal group Indivisible.